Richard, thank you very much for making yourself available for this. Found it very interesting, both from the point of view of your collapse recovery, which I thought was excellent, but also just from the point of view of it's like a classic life cycle of an incident where there's pilot error, there's pilot decision making, there's pilot recovery, and we can also see the result. I should introduce myself. My name is David May, and I'm the safety officer for the Dales Hang Gliding and Paragliding Club. So we're based in Yorkshire in the UK. Yeah. And Richard, if you want to tell us who you are.
Hi, I'm Richard Meek. I'm also part of the Dales Hang Gliding and Paragliding Club.
So if we could just, if you could give me a quick summary of your background, your flying background, Richard.
Okay.
So I learned to fly in 1993. Since 2016, I've been putting more time into it and I've been averaging around 200 hours a year. Currently fly an ozone Zeno, and on that particular day I was on a Woody Valley GTO light harness. I've got about 250 hours on the Zeno. This year I had 100 hours from a trip to Colombia earlier in the year, but since the lockdown in mid-March, I hadn't flown at all. And this was the first flight after the lockdown.
So could you tell me a little bit about your civ experience and also what you do to keep yourself current on, primarily we'd say on recovery technique?
I've done 4 SIV courses, 2 each with Jockey Sanderson and Flyo, and I can recommend both those organisations. I've supplemented that with practice myself. I practice stalls over Lake Garda, been there for a couple of weeks, and I'm up to about 250 stalls in total, of which about 30 are on the Zeno. I also practice wingovers, spiral dives, and rapid exits from spirals. At the end of an XC, if I've got height remaining, then I'll do some practice there. Or if it's a non-XC day and I've got height spare, then I'll practice there as well. I think it all goes to improve your skills, how to manage the energy and angles of attack that the glider might present them.
That's unusual, I would say, in my experience of just the people I fly with. So if you could talk to me about just the day itself.
So the day of the incident, it was first flying day after lockdown. It was forecast for a northwesterly, forecast for a good 4-star.
Let's talk about launch then. You mentioned you did a Cobra launch because it was a little bit windy.
Yeah, I did a Cobra launch. It's my preferred option for windy days. Less time in the power zone, easier to control. At the time, I thought things were okay, albeit the Cobra wasn't quite as seamless as normal. I mean, in hindsight, with the benefit of looking at the video, I can see that there were at least 2 clear warnings that something wasn't right. Firstly, I was having to apply a lot of brake on the left-hand side, more than normal, which caused that side to stall, and then I pulled it up again. And then there was also a front collapse, but offset to the left-hand side. And that's without precedent. I've not seen that at all before. So that was a clear indicator that there was a problem.
What happened then?
Yep, I had a look up at the glider, all seemed okay. It was fully inflated, span was there, everything looked good. So I launched. And fairly soon, I realized that something was wrong. There was a rustle from above. So I looked up, couldn't see anything. Everything still looked good. Thought it was maybe a tip collapse, which would have been unusual, but not unprecedented. Then the same thing happened a few seconds later. Again, looked up. It had all recovered by the time I looked up and nothing to see. I think it was the 3rd occasion that I looked up and saw that it wasn't a tip collapse. It was actually the front had come under. And then once I'd seen that, sort of looking up, I then saw that there was a big, quite a substantial knot in the AR2 riser, which is the middle of the 3 risers that branch off the A riser. Having recognised that there's an issue there, fleetingly, it crossed my mind about coming in for a top landing, but I soon discarded that idea because it was quite windy and the terrain is uneven there. So I decided just play it safe, go down to the bottom and land there.
Okay. So you decided to turn around and bottom land. How much height would you have had above AGL at that stage?
Height-wise, the site is around 110 meters top to bottom. So, and it's fairly steep. So as soon as I'd launched, I probably got, I've soon up to at least 50 meters of ground clearance. And then when I decided to bottom land, I pushed out and I was effectively over the bottom landing. So I was working my way down from 100 meters of ground clearance.
Could you talk us through then what happened as you were coming into land?
So the hill was on my right. The wing with the knotting was on the left, away from the hill. And I had a large collapse on the left-hand side. I felt the pressure reducing, so I was applying brake to try and recover that pressure. I looked up, saw that it was a fairly big collapse, kept that, buried that left-hand side to try and prevent the collapse. But as soon as it had come all the way down, it was released the left-hand side brake, so give it the opportunity to recover, and then control the right-hand side. So I'd already was leaning right and applied a little bit of right brake to control the position and the turn of the glider. Then the right-hand side started to surge violently. So it was a case of burying the right-hand side brake. That obviously controls the surge, forces the air through the left-hand side that's collapsed, brings the span back. And with the wing ahead of me, it was a case of burying both brakes to prevent it surging and symmetrically tucking beneath me. So once the surge is controlled, hands up, swing through. I did have a disconcerting moment as I was swinging through. I noticed quite a substantial rock in the grassy area. Looking at the IGC, then it appears that I had about 16 meters ground clearance minimum. To be honest, it didn't feel that I had that much.
But it certainly looked like you got very close to the ground and you were moving quite fast. And I remember the first time I saw that, the reaction I had was, whoa, I was close. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I'd like to ask you about was, I suppose it's to do with where luck comes into play, because a lot of what we've talked up to this was completely in your control. Both the good and the bad was in your control. You had a poor decision to launch without doing a flight check, but then you had very good decision to turn around and very good reactions to recover your wing. So that was good and bad, both in your control. But was there an element of luck? For instance, the collapse was on the outside, on the wing away from the hill, purely because that's the side of the wing that the knot was on.
Yeah.
Now, when that side collapsed, the natural reaction or the natural inclination of the wing would be to turn away from the hill, because it was the side away from the hill that collapsed.
Yes.
And by turning away from the hill, it gave you more height above the ground to recover. So I just wonder what would have happened, or what might have happened, had you had the same collapse, but the knot was on the other side of the wing.
If that collapse had occurred when I was doing a beat with the hill on the left-hand side, I think it's highly likely that I would have swung through, hit the ground and injured myself. And the degree of injury is, could have been anything from minor through to extremely serious. So I definitely dodged a bullet that day, I think.
Looking back on it now, what have you learned from it? What lessons have you learned from it, or anything that you would do differently?
Well, the main thing is about doing a more diligent pre-flight check. I wasn't deliberately doing any kind of shortcuts in the pre-flight check. I thought I was doing a a good pre-flight check, but clearly it was inadequate. So I need to be more thorough in that respect. Second thing is picking up on anything that feels unusual or different, because I did have that opportunity as I was launching, and the Cobra launch wasn't quite how I would normally have done it. I was having to apply more left-hand brake, and then there was that collapse. Now I don't remember, sorry, the collapse as I was launching. I don't remember seeing that collapse at the time, but on the video it seems that I was looking up, and so I should have seen it. But basically, I'm sort of more heightened concern for anything that's out of the ordinary. As I mentioned earlier, if a similar situation was to recur, which I hope it wouldn't, but a knot in the A-riser, and perhaps this is something more for other people, if anyone else was to encounter a situation where they've got a knot in the A-riser, well, that is effectively like putting a bit of speed bar on. So a better way to control it, particularly on a two-liner or a higher spec D, might be using a rear riser control rather than the brake, because the brake will make it unstable. I also need to practice and make it instinctive to tuck my legs under in any kind of incident. Because whilst I had my legs out at the time, because I was coming into land, I noticed that I hadn't really made any movement with my legs at all. And if that had occurred in normal flight, when, feet straight out in the pod, there was no evidence that I would have tucked my feet under at all. So I've got to work on that. And also just continue doing lots of SIV practice, so that recovery techniques just become instinctive and don't need to be thought about.